Envision the mountains of northern Iberia, early 8th century. Wet stone, cold mist, a narrow valley that gives no second chance. An empire has already broken the old kingdom below. Its armies crossed from Africa and evaporated the Visigothic nobility in a single afternoon. Now it looks north, toward a handful of men hidden above the gorge. On paper, this should be over in an afternoon. Too few fighters, too little space. No road to escape. The Umayyad commanders have conquered from the Atlantic to the Indus. What damage can a few wild donkeys do to them? But wars are not decided on paper. They are decided by ground, by timing, and by the moment an army walks into terrain it does not understand. Here in Covadonga, a small resistance under Don Pelayo, an Asturian noble tied to the fallen Visigothic elite, will test a larger power where numbers lose their meaning. The question is simple. When a conquest seems complete, can one mountain refuge still refuse the future being forced upon it? Because once the column enters this gorge, the struggle becomes a test of arrogance, terrain, and survival. To understand how Pelayo ended up in that cave, you have to understand the speed of the Umayyad advance. In 711, Islamic forces crossed the Strait of Gibraltar. At Guadalete, the Visigothic king Roderick was betrayed by his own nobles. The wings of his army simply stopped fighting. The kingdom collapsed in weeks. The conquerors swept north. Toledo, Seville, Cordoba, cities opened their gates. But one man refused to accept the new order. Pelayo, a noble of the royal bodyguard, saw his world collapse. He retreated north, step by bloody step. The Umayyads captured him and brought him to Cordoba, a gilded cage. They wanted to domesticate him, make him a compliant puppet. But Pelayo waited, slipped his chains, and escaped. He didn't run to France. He ran back to the wildest, hardest place in Spain. He ran to Asturias. There he gathered a small coalition. Displaced warriors, local villagers, men unwilling to accept the disappearance of their world. It was not an army. It was a frontier resistance forming among cliffs and forest. The mountains became their strongest ally. The terrain was the real weapon. Pelayo studied every approach, where riders would slow, where formations would stretch thin, where cliffs overlooked the gorge leading to Covadonga. From the perspective of the Umayyad governors, Asturias seemed isolated and poor. One official reportedly called Pelayo and his followers 30 wild donkeys. That dismissal gave Pelayo something more valuable than weapons: time. When the expedition finally moved north, its objective was simple: remove the rebel leader. Commander Al-Qama marched thousands into the mountains expecting a surrender. Yet the environment altered how that force could move. Columns stretched along the valley floor. Riders struggled on uneven ground. Somewhere above, Pelayo was already waiting. The cave offered a natural defensive position high above. Any force approaching it would have to climb steep slopes while exposed. Pelayo's plan relied on drawing the enemy into the most restrictive part of the gorge, where cliffs and river left no room to move. positions disrupted any response. Umayyad archers fired from below, trying to suppress the cave mouth, but the overhang turned their arrows back on themselves. Shafts ricocheted off stone, raining down on their own ranks. Then the ridges above came alive. Boulders and felled trees crashed into the packed column. The valley became a trap with no exit. Al-Qama fell in the chaos. With his death, the will to fight vanished. Survivors fled east through the high passes, desperate to escape. But the mountains were not finished. Near Kosgaya, the rain-soaked slope gave way. A massive landslide buried the retreating column. The river ran red for days. When the fighting ended, the resistance in Asturias had not been removed. Pelayo remained in possession of the valleys around Covadonga. A small community had secured a foothold that outside powers would struggle to erase. The Umayyads never again tried to conquer these peaks. The clash did not end the Umayyad conquest of Spain, but it proved something the new rulers had not expected. A resistance in the northern mountains had survived. For the first time since 711, a Christian force had stood and won. In Asturias, Pelayo and his followers were no longer fugitives. They had secured a place that couldn't easily be erased. From this mountain refuge, a small kingdom began to form, a community that saw itself as the continuation of an older order. They built churches that looked like fortresses. They wrote laws. They preserved the culture that the conquest had tried to erase. The wider struggle for the peninsula would continue for nearly 800 years. The Reconquista became the longest war in human history. But here, in these remote peaks, the first durable line of opposition had taken shape. A mustard seed that would eventually grow into Portugal, Castile, and Spain. And that is why this quiet gorge, hidden in the mountains of Asturias, is remembered as the place where a defeated world refused to disappear. But the real question remains, when power seems absolute, how often does history change in places no empire thought worth watching?